Since color is perceived through light, before we talk about color wheels, it's important to understand we are working in a digital format. Even the screens that we are looking at displays and treats colors differently than mixing pigments for paint would. This leads us to first understanding the difference between working in the two main digital color modes of RGB and CMYK. So as we go through this, I want you to remember the two big differences. RGB is based on light that adds brightness, and CMYK is based on ink that subtracts brightness. Keep that in mind as we go through this lesson. So you may be wondering, well, what even is RGB and CMYK? Well, they are both color modes and are acronyms for the primary colors they work with. RGB stands for red, green, blue, respectively, while CMYK stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, and key, though it's widely accepted that this mainly stands for black. So let's focus on RGB first. If you magnify a computer, television, or phone screen, you see a combination of pixels that are either red, green, or blue. That's because you can create any color based on these three as seen here. Now you may think, wait a minute, I thought red, blue, and yellow were primaries for mixing. Well, for traditional mixing, that is correct, but it's different for digital. When it comes to light, yellow is actually the combination of red and green light shining together at the same point. And when you add blue to the mix, you get white. Don't believe me? Well, I wasn't so sure at first either. I needed to test this theory in practice, so I got 3 flashlights and covered them with a green, blue, and red filter. It's a small experiment, but when I combined the colors, the light did indeed turn white. So that's why RGB is considered additive, because it adds brightness. Now let's focus on CMYK. This is used for printing purposes. Since we can't print light, CMYK replaces RGB for mixing and multiplying colors together. In this case, you can create colors based on the 3 primaries of cyan, magenta, and yellow. But then why does this one have a K or black attached to it? Well, when you want black with RGB, you don't light any pixels. So you start with black, where the opposite is true with CMYK. When you want black with CMYK, you add all the primaries of cyan, magenta, and yellow to create as close to black as possible. But since printers don't want to waste all 3 inks trying to make it black, a 4th cartridge was added to fix that problem. That's why CMYK is considered subtractive, because you're taking away the brightness when adding colors rather than adding brightness. So pretty much when you think of CMYK, you can think of it as starting with white, because that's what the paper starts as, and when you add ink to it, you're darkening it, hence subtracting brightness. Now, something that's pretty cool that I didn't see at first is that if you take away the primaries of one of the circle maps, so for example in RGB, let's take away red, green, and blue on both of them, you are left with cyan, magenta, and yellow on both circle maps. And the same goes when you hide the other primaries of the other circle map. So you can see how they work with very similar colors, just in a different way. Now you may be thinking, Tim, those don't look like the same colors, and those green and cyan colors definitely are noticeably different. And yes, you would be correct. While they are similar, since one is dealing with light and the other is dealing with ink, there is a slight difference between the final colors as seen here. And this is usually why when you print something that was created in RGB, it turns out darker, especially when K is added to the darker areas of the piece. So let's sum this up. RGB is considered additive because it's based on light that adds brightness, while CMYK is considered subtractive because it deals with ink and it subtracts the brightness. So for your own work, if you're going to be working in a format that is going to be seen and displayed digitally, such as a computer screen or a tablet, you want to work in RGB. But if you're working specifically for something to get printed, then you want to work in CMYK. And that's the main difference.